Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Steve, Old Man Reads. I decided to start the channel off with the Booktube Newbie Tag. I'm not new to YouTube. I've had a vinyl record channel for about 10 years now. I've done some book stuff on there, but it's mostly been music-related books. But the music-related books is a small part of what I read. And I kind of stumbled on Booktube by accident, I guess about a month and a half ago. And just kind of really dug what I saw. A lot of the things that I like about the vinyl community on YouTube, I kind of like about the Booktube community as well. So I decided, you know what, I'll start a channel here where I can focus just on books and literature and just reading in general. And decided to start with this. So yeah, let's just jump in. So the first question is, why did you start the channel? I just kind of mentioned it. Like I said, I stumbled on Booktube about a month and a half ago. I've always read, and I think a question, we'll cover that later. But I got to the point where I was only reading before bed, whereas I used to love reading throughout the day, and I've kind of got back in the habit of that as of late. I found when I read before bed, I start dozing off after about 15 or 20 pages, and I end up having to reread the last 5 or 6 pages, and I just wasn't retaining it or enjoying reading as much. But what kind of led me to Booktube is I had just finished reading The Hobbit, and I wasn't sure where I wanted to go next. I bounce around quite a bit. I read fantasy. I like a lot of surrealism. I like sci-fi. I like mixtures of them. I read a lot of nonfiction as well. Again, music books, whether it's biographies, autobiographies, or genre-specific books. I literally bounce around to just whatever I'm in the mood, whatever strikes me, I'll grab and read. And every once in a while, I just won't know what to read, so I would go online and look at top 10 lists. A website that I used to like was Listverse. They always had really good book lists and literature lists in general. And I found some really good books there. That's how I got turned on to American Gods about 10, 12 years ago. I got turned on to a couple of the Asimov books. I got turned on to, what else did there's a few more. Neuromancer I found through there. And I went to the list and I didn't see any recent lists. All the lists were from like 7 or 8 years ago. So I just did a search on YouTube. I figured somebody had to have some top 10 lists. And I ran across quite a few. And one of the books that popped up, or one of the series that popped up, was the Stormlight series. I wasn't familiar with Brandon Sanderson. But everybody, like their number 2 or their number 3 fantasy series, pretty much consistently across the board, male, female, regardless of age, was the Stormlight Archive. So I decided to grab the first, or I actually downloaded it onto, or read it on my iPad mini. Had I saw the actual book and that it was 1,000 pages, I probably would have been intimidated by it. But I mean, I've read books that long before, but not that often, you know. And I mean, I couldn't stop reading it, and it got me to the point where throughout the day I was just constantly thinking about the story. And this is just from book 1. This is just Way of Kings. And I was just blown away by how good it was. And I started looking at some other lists and watching some other videos, and really got into it. It kind of piqued my interest on quite a few different genres and writers and books. And I'll do a video, you know, in the last month, I've probably bought 24 books. Not all from videos that you guys have put out, but just in general. There were some books that I've wanted to read or reread that I haven't read since the 80s. Some of the Stephen King stuff that scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. I really kind of want to reread that stuff, you know. through a different lens at almost 50. So I grabbed some of that stuff. One of my favorite writers is Haruki Murakami. I lived in Japan for a decade, and I've always really related with his writing. And so I grabbed a few of his books that I hadn't read and a few that I wanted to read again. Anyway, I'll do another video where I talk about the books that I've bought. What are some fun and unique things you can bring to Booktube? Like I said, I kind of bounce around. I don't stick with just one genre, and there's plenty of people in Booktube that I've seen that kind of bounce around a little bit like I do. Just a different perspective. I've lived all over the world. I lived in Asia for about 10 years. I lived in Europe for about 4 years. I've spent a lot of time in South America. My wife is Brazilian. So I've been all over the world. I was in the military for almost a decade and traveled all over the world with that. So that's turned me on to quite a few different perspectives than you may get from other people. And it just kind of opened up my tastes to different areas as well. What's the most exciting? What are you most excited for about the channel? I've made some really good friendships through the YouTube vinyl community. People that I talk to that we text almost daily. I do a couple music podcasts with different people. I've met some really a lot of professional musicians that you guys would know through that channel, and it's been a lot of fun. And I hope to have the same, meet some cool people. And just have that same kind of experience on Booktube that I've had within the vinyl community on YouTube. Why do you love reading? I've been reading my whole life. My mom, my grandma, my dad were all readers, and that was just something we always did. I got away from it at various points in my life, but I've always kind of come back to reading. I love movies too. Especially classic movies. I've got a huge stack of the Criterion collection here. I just love a lot of the really classic movies from the last 50 years. And though I like those, I've always liked the books a little bit more. The books have more of an impact on me. I retain them more. And, you get more out of the books than you get out of the movies. I just watched The Thin Red Line actually yesterday, which is a fantastic movie, but it's not as impactful as the book is. It was just a fantastic book that really triggered something in me, and you don't get that from the movies. Let's see. What book or series got you into reading? It's hard to say. Again, I've been reading since I was very young. I want to say 82, 83. I don't know if you guys know the Zork series of books. They were fantasy choose your own adventure books. I think they came out in like 82-ish. I loved those things. I read them over and over again. There were like 20 different endings. I really got into those books. Within a few years, I had gotten into C.S. Lewis. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was one of my favorite books for a long time. I remember Where the Red Fern Grows really affected me as a kid. From the Mixed Up Files of Miss Bosley Frankweiler was another book that I loved as a kid. And I've shared a lot of these books with my daughter, who also loves them. Speaking of Brandon Sanderson, I just bought her Mistborn. She saw me reading the Stormlight Archive and thought it was too much. So based on all of your reviews, I decided to get her Mistborn to check out, and she's only about a chapter in, but she's really digging it so far. So hopefully I can get her reading more often as well. She's kind of gotten to it on her own, asking me to buy books for her, and I'll see her reading here and there. I'd like to get her doing it more. She's a freshman in high school, and getting her to do anything other than be on her phone is difficult. Let's see. Some other things that got me. Stephen King's first book, I think Carrie. Actually, I have it right here. I think Carrie came out in like 74. Yeah, 74. So Carrie came out right before I was born. So I've literally grown up with, I remember when it came out. I remember when Pet Sematary came out. I was probably 8 or 9 when I started reading Pet Sematary. I was staying at a friend's house for the weekend, and their dad had a copy of it. And I read probably the first quarter of it. At like 9 years old. Maybe I was 10. I don't know. I was young though. And man, that messed with me. But I loved Stephen King. And you know, I remember reading Cujo very young. The Dark Half, not even understanding it. But, you know, I got into fantasy probably junior high time frame. Somebody from my family church, actually my piano teacher, her son was older. He was in his 20s at the time, but he was really into fantasy, and he turned me on to quite a few writers. He gave me a few. His favorite author at the time, and probably the biggest author of the time, was David Eddings. He gave me a couple of the David Eddings books. I really liked those. He gave me the Dragonlance trilogy, which is still one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I actually just ordered a new copy of it because I want to reread it. I reread the first book about 2 years ago, but I'd like to go through and read all 3 of them. If you guys haven't read that, it's fantastic if you're into fantasy. But yeah, I mean, those were all books and series that just kind of kept me going over the years. I remember my first deployment to the Middle East was in '97. This is before the Second Gulf War kicked off. I was on a 6-month. I was in the Navy at the time, and 6-month deployment. You're on the ship. You know, you're working 12 on, 12 off, 7 days a week. You know, I think we were at sea for like 50 something days before we pulled in for the first time, and they had a library on the ship, and I read the first 4 books of the Dark Tower series. I think that was all that was out at the time. This was 98. I read the first 4 or 5 books, however many there were at the time. But then there was like a 10-year lull before Stephen King. I think The Wolves of Kala was the next one. And by the time that came out, I'd completely forgotten the first few books. So I probably will reread those in the next year or two. Just because I would like to. I loved Roland. That was one of my favorite characters at the time. And I really want to go back and revisit that and finish off the series. What questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? I'm not really sure right now. There's a few channels that I'm following. It's more just me learning what's being read now. You know, again, most of the fantasy that I was reading is from the 80s and 90s. Since then, I haven't read a lot of fantasy, so I don't know a lot of the modern a lot of the modern authors. So it's just been kind of learning, and yeah, I mean, that's pretty much. I don't really have anything to ask right now. I'm just kind of picking up what you guys are putting out at the moment. You know, I'm sure I will, and I'm sure as I'm, posting to your videos and whatnot, we'll get some discussions going. What challenges do you think starting a Booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? I've been doing the vinyl community channel for, like I said, for 10 years now. I've got a really good core. I've got a few thousand subscribers. I've got a really good core. 20 or 30 people that I'm in constant communication with. We're commenting back and forth, and just building up that kind of community around me again. When I first started doing YouTube videos in 2014, there weren't that many channels yet doing that kind of content, so it took a long time to build up. And we'll see. Just the grind of putting out videos and hoping people will dig them and getting those discussions started. When did you start reading? Again, I've been reading as long as I can remember. I remember in the early days, like I said, the choose your own adventure books I loved. I remember when the Shel Silverstein books came out. That was the early 80s as well, if I remember correctly. I loved the poetry in those. I loved the scary story. I remember in first or second grade, the scary stories of telling in the dark books came out. I think there's 3 of those. I checked those out from the school library over and over again. I like those so much. So again, I've been into reading for a long time, and I just always have read. I don't remember when I started. Where do you read? Actually, I read right here. This is my office. Behind me are my work monitors. Over here is my main my Mac for my personal computing. I'm in this chair probably 8 or 9 hours a day, and when I have lulls, I've got books right here that one I just finished, one I'm about to read. My iPad is always here. Couple books here, so I spend a lot of time reading here. I've got a really nice recliner in my bedroom that when my wife doesn't have our clothes piled on them, I am reading there. Again, I read before bed, so just pretty much anywhere around the house. We just actually had a new deck put on the front of the house. It's been hot. I'm in north of Atlanta. And it's been in the 80s and 90s with about 80% humidity lately, so it's been too hot. But I look forward to just sitting on the front deck there and reading. Actually, it was raining one day and it cooled down. It was really nice. I just sat out there for about 2 hours reading. It was really nice. So just wherever I get comfortable. And then, what kind of books do you like to read? I kind of mentioned that already. I just finished the first book of the Stormlight Archive. I liked that so much that before I was halfway through it, I ordered the other 3 books and pre-ordered the one coming out in December. I wanted to start book 2 right away, but it actually just came in today. I ordered it like 2.5 weeks ago, and it got lost in shipping. I wanted the hardcover books. I went to the local bookstores and nobody had them. And the main reason I wanted the hardcover books too was because I pre-ordered a signed copy of the new one from Barnes and Noble, and that's it's a hardcover. So if that one's hardcover, they all have to be hardcover. So I ended up having to order them online, but. What kind of books do you read? It's all over the place. I mentioned Haruki Murakami is a favorite of mine. I love Japanese literature in general. Like I said, I lived there for a decade. I love anything history-wise when it comes to samurais, Japanese culture. I read a lot of that. I go back and forth with Stephen King, where I'll read a couple of his books. Every couple years, I end up going back and reading him again. What else? And I've got a huge stack. Like I said, I'll do another video of stuff that I've recently bought based on recommendations I've gotten on the channel. So that's it for me. I think we're at 20 minutes. I think that's long enough for an introductory video. I'll put some more stuff up. I'm going to try to do 2 videos a week for the time being. I've been going back. I like I said, I read The Hobbit last month, and it just kind of re-sparked, or it sparked something in me where I kind of wanted to take a look at the history of modern literature, modern fantasy. I mean, I've always considered the beginning of fantasy to be J.R.R. Tolkien, and I had never considered where he got his ideas from. So I started looking online at some of the pre-Tolkien modern fantasy books, and the oldest book I read is from 1841, I believe, and it's fantastic, and I'll talk about that in another video. But I've read 3 pre-Tolkien books, and all three of them have a little piece of Tolkien in there. Like you can see direct parallels between those books. And actually, I'm reading another one right now that I just started this afternoon. So I'll do some videos on those because it's some interesting. You know, I notice a lot of people in the community are reading modern books or classics. You know, which I love that too. You know, like I said, you guys turned me on to a lot of modern artists. I think it's cool to kind of look back at where the form came from, and you know, the writing in the 1800s in many ways was as good, if not better, than the writing now. And a lot of it was shorter stories. A lot of the novels that I've read from that era are, you know, 100, 150 pages. And the amount and the texture that they get in that short page count is amazing. So I look forward to sharing some thoughts and discussions on that as well. But that's it for me, guys. I hope you're all doing good, and I look forward to chatting with you in the future. Take care, everybody. Thanks.